Hello, welcome to Inspired Caring. I'm your host, Michelle Magner. If you are caring for an older family member, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I bring insight, tips, inspiration, and strategies to help you care for the people that you love without losing yourself along the way. Having cared for both of my grandmothers, I've helped manage everything from hospital stays, households full of belongings, to navigating senior living and end-of-life care. And I've worked in senior living as a result of that experience, serving my residents and their families as they've been on this journey too. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Inspired Caring. Well, good morning, Kaley. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so glad to be here.
I am so happy that you are here. I feel like I have been on this island and you are this beautiful oasis of someone who is, I feel, years ahead of me on the journey with your caregiving coaching business. So I just am so excited that you're here to share a little bit about your caregiver journey and how things evolved for you that led you to be helping with other people. So just introduce yourself and then share a little bit about where it all began.
Wonderful. I'm just so happy and honored to be sharing my story here today and just getting the opportunity to connect with your community. So I just want to thank you for that. So like Michelle said, my name is Kaley Johnson, and I'm a certified health and life coach who specializes in supporting caregivers. So I've been a caregiver professionally for 25 years. I also have a degree in human services. I've been a foster parent in the past, worked in all sorts of caregiving roles professionally. And until recently, I was the caregiver to my 92-year-old grandmother, who was one of my best friends my entire life. But she has recently passed away and we miss her dearly. But it was a huge honor to help her and support her in that way. But I understand it's not an easy job at times, and the unique challenges that come with that role. So because of my experience in caregiving and how near and dear it is to my heart, I just feel like I said, like I can relate with so many of the challenges that arise. And there's such a gap in services to support caregivers.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to create that space where caregivers could be supported, because I see so many caregivers start losing their own identity while caring for their loved one. And it's just extremely easy to become exhausted or burnt out. So just creating that space for them.
You and I have that in common, that I helped my grandmothers as well. And one of them was like a second mother to me. I lived, like the majority of my life, I lived within a 2 to 3 hour distance of her. So I agree with you. It is such a privilege. And I do think that the weight of caregiving can just start to feel so heavy that we can lose sight of the gifts.
Yeah, definitely.
That come with it. Do you feel like there's a difference between your professional role as a caregiver and your personal experience? I know for me, because I am currently going between professional and a family member who's been helping my in-laws. And it's sort of like when I've been wearing my kid hat, my personal role hat, I do start to lose some of my training. I'm able to like bring myself back. But did you feel a difference between the two, or were you able to like keep the connections?
Yeah, I feel like it's very different at the same time as it's the same, if that makes any sense. Like when I was in my professional caregiving role, it was easier for me to not be emotionally involved into the level that I would be in a family, where families have roles and everyone has their place, and they kind of just always fall into that role, even back from childhood, versus being in the professional role where that piece was taken out of it. And so So they were both had their own challenges, but oftentimes they were similar challenges too. So I don't know if that helped, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could definitely see the difference, but I could also see there was a common thread. And then supporting the family that I was, because I was the roles I was in, some were in a specific families, other were in more settings like homes and things,
Mhm.
like group homes. But when I was working directly with specific families, I could very much just be that support system because I could relate from my personal experience.
That totally resonates with me. My father-in-law just passed away recently as well. And it was so interesting to me because when I had my daughter hat on, I thought we were solving a problem. Like my goal was to help get him comfortable so we can look at what's next. And it was so fascinating to me because we were in his assisted living apartment. And I like stepped out of the room where he was because he was resting comfortably and ate a snack. And then I walked by his door and I was like, oh, he's dying. Like the employee professional like saw with different eyes. So I
Mhm.
just think that's a gift that you and I bring to families to be able
Mhm.
to walk that line with them.
Mhm. Definitely. I agree with that. There was definitely times where you were the caregiver role and then the
Mhm.
granddaughter role, and really navigating that in a way that worked.
So let's talk about some gaps in the system because um, I agree with you. It feels like there's a lot of tangible logistical resources for
Mhm.
people, but then we don't talk a lot about how to emotionally navigate it. Just so, what state are you in?
I'm in Minnesota, northern
In
Minnesota by Lake Superior.
Right. So even resource wise in the US, because we do have some international listeners, there are a lot of similar resources like area offices on aging,
Mhm.
health agencies, things like that. So I guess just talk a little bit more about where you started to find those gaps and see the gaps.
Yeah, well, even when my grandma was really needing much more care due to COVID, everything has been exhausted really for support services except for hospice. Hospice was really the only resource that we could rely on. And so just recognizing that piece too was, if you wanted to even get caregivers to come into your home or to her even going into a care facility, we couldn't see her. And her mental health, she was in the hospital for 3 days when we couldn't see her. And
Mm,
she didn't understand. She didn't understand where her family was. She only saw strangers, and she was already mentally declining in her cognition. So it was just, that wasn't an option. And so just, there was already a lack of services, but COVID just really compounded that
right.
piece. And so really just focusing on the, like you said, like the emotional pieces, like that part didn't exist. The like logistics of it was a struggle, but to go any deeper than that, like I didn't find anything at all. So I really tried to just develop a few programs depending on where people are, and provide support and help them learn to show up for themselves and how to make themselves a priority. Because what I recognized is that so many caregivers, like that piece is selfish, and
Mm,
really helping them learn and understand that when they show up for themselves, that it's really a necessity in being healthy for them. And when we show up for ourselves consistently, that's when we learn to be that fully sourced caregiver, not showing up on fumes, not the impatient, exhausted, resentful person that happens when we are not caring for ourselves. And so I just really work with partnering with the caregiver. And together we make a personalized plan on what they want to change in their life. Like I'm not arriving there and saying, this is what you need to do, but where do you need the support? what would be beneficial. And it's so much of the emotional, the mental health side, the feelings, feeling guilty for having the resentment, and just working through all of those pieces and giving them that support so that they can go and then support the person that they're caring for, because we all need support, and really being that. For me anyways, it was really hard for me to accept the help initially. And there's a whole piece of how I even got into that. But really also not just having the plan, but to provide the support, the accountability with the right steps, and the bite-sized pieces. People want change like tomorrow, and it's really keeping it small in the bite-sized pieces that really helps us get to where we want to get. And then through that process, we develop a relationship on trust and respect, which really allows us to explore their values, their limiting beliefs, and blind spots. We all have blind spots. And I'm sure that maybe you've seen in your life before, when someone in your world was really struggling, you could see exactly what the challenge was, but we're too close to our own stuff. So we, it's beneficial for everybody, but specifically for caregivers, because we often stand in our own way, and we just don't see it.
It's so hard when you are in the weeds of the day to day. And as you know, there's phases of this caregiver journey, and some are more stable, and some are much more volatile. Did you say fully sourced?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love that language. It goes back to like putting your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
Or not being able to pour from an empty pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
I like so much that you talk about a customized plan for people, because there are a lot of situations that are very, very similar, but there are unique circumstances that people are facing, and we're all have different strengths, and our values may vary a little bit.
So, yeah, definitely.
For some people, maybe, like I know for me, it would be meals are just such a struggle, like organizing and planning those meals.
Right. Yes.
And during those more challenging times when you just feel like you have tunnel vision.
Yes.
So are people coming to you, like at what phase do you find that people are finding you at? Are you open to working with everybody? Do you find if they're up for air, that is a good time to start looking at this stuff?
I meet people where they're at. So I really try to, that's what the customized individual support is. But I have noticed that when people are desperate for change, they have the best results. When they're not, they're willing to let go of their excuses. They're willing to let go of the limiting beliefs, me included. Like, I had to be desperate before this was something that I was going to sign up for, because getting help or asking for support is not something that caregivers have ever done usually in their life. They're usually the ones caring for everybody, and it's been their norm. So if I need support, I must be failing, was my thought. And many of the people that I connect with and work with, is their initial belief. But really getting under that and recognizing we can't do this job alone. And how can you be supported? Support looks all different ways. It can be getting help with caregiving. It could be help navigating meals, how they have, you can get support through a day program, how you can get connected with resources. Support can be all sorts of things. And there is support out there for everybody. And just connecting with what support's best for you is through a series of questions. We kind of just really dial in on that. So people know what this plan is and what the steps are and how we're going to reach our the goals that we set.
And those small bite-size, attainable, reasonable, like sometimes we can't necessarily go from I hate my body to I love my body. There's some middle ground in there to cover.
Definitely. So we take the baby steps, because my clients are always so amazed when it's just 6 weeks or 3 months down the road, and they look back down the path and they're like, that wasn't hard. Like, the things we did weren't hard. but I thought they would be impossible. I thought I couldn't arrive at this place. And now that I see this, what else is available to me? And just have that inspiration and that motivation, with the proof of what. And so they have to, be, like I said, they have to be almost in that desperate mode to be able to trust and just be able to let go of, because so many times just being human beings, and my coach says this all the time, is to really focus on our opportunities and our possibilities versus and let go of our limitations, because we're always so hanging on so tight to our limitations, but we don't see that all the time.
Right.
I'd love to do that, but I can't.
Right.
Well, but why can't you? And then just kind of, asking the right questions, and the person arrives at the answer themselves. Like, I'm not giving anybody answers, but just guiding them back to their personal power. Because like you said, when you're in the weeds, you get tunnel vision and you can only see the things going wrong. And then that just is a really demotivating place to be.
Well, and sometimes what we're holding on to, these stories that we're telling ourselves, are things that have just been handed down generationally.
Yes.
And all of those belief systems have been implanted in us at, by age 7, many of our
Yes.
belief systems. And
Yes.
so, thinking back to who were the adults in your life at that time, and were they the most trusted source for who you are?
Absolutely. Yes,
They
we
probably
do.
had their own stuff.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, they probably had their own stuff. And oftentimes, we're
Yeah.
caring for our parents. And so the dynamics with our parents as roles reverse can be really challenging and complicated.
That's so true. So true. We do a deep dive into tapping into that subconscious and really shining a light on those old soundtracks playing in the back, because we're not even aware of them oftentimes. And so really building awareness of our thoughts, which is creating our feelings, which then create our beliefs. And then that's where we take action from, but we're on autopilot 95% of the day. So, so we're not always aware of that. So really teaching people how to tap into that and learn where, what beliefs are we taking action from, and do they serve us anymore? And if they don't, that's okay. Then we can just make them more empowering or more encouraging.
I felt like I really held on. It's a pretty common misconceived belief that I am not good enough. And I felt like I really held on to that belief based on evidence I had collected over the years until like age 46 or something. I just turned 50. And I looked up the word enough and thought, oh my goodness, that does not apply to me. Like, that's actually not my word. So like you're just saying, asking the right questions of people, leading their curiosity, and to kind of question everything is so important.
Yeah, it is. And I always one of my favorite quotes I share with my clients is, don't believe everything you think. And they always laugh, but it's true. It's like our brain tells us what we want to hear, justification, stories. And it's really actually a healthy practice to ask ourselves multiple times a day, is that a true fact? Like what the majority of people agree with this, or is this my opinion? Is this a story? And if it's a story, then, is it serving me anymore? And can I up level it? And we do a lot with the self-talk in my programs, with really dialing in and how are we talking to ourselves? Are we talking to ourselves like that kind friend, or are we really being that bully and critic? And that is a huge piece even of our mental health and what we believe that we can even strive for or do. If I believe that I'm going to be a caregiver and my life is going to be terrible, that's going to be my reality, because I'm not going to see any possibility. It's just how our brain works, or any opportunity for it to be different. So really start to shift that perspective that we can be a caregiver and we can have our life too. Our life will look different, but we are the creators. We are the authors of our life, and we get to do it the way that feels best for us. And
so riled up right now.
Yeah. But I mean, just giving the power back to the caregiver, because I mean, everything seems so powerless, and really we have much more control over what we experience than we are led to believe.
Absolutely. I just went on a hike, and it was a really challenging part of this hike. And I mean, you really have to overcome some belief systems and thought processes as you are challenging yourself physically. And one of the things that really stood out to me was that along this hike, strangers were just saying to each other, "You're almost there. It's just around the corner." Like, I mean, it makes me want to cry right now because clearly there's an energy that someone is exuding, like, "I don't think I can do this. I'm exhausted. This is unsustainable," right? But then you have these people just enveloping you with encouragement. And I feel like you've created that with your program and then the group that you offer. So do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that group?
Yeah. So I have a Facebook group called the Healthy Caregiver, where I offer weekly live trainings. I offer events like master classes, workshops, challenges, mini courses, all free resources for caregivers. And an exciting new announcement that I'm collaborating with another caregiver expert on is starting a caregiver support group. And that all the details haven't been ironed out yet, but that is going to be launched, I believe, in May sometime. So, and that's just another free resource for caregivers. So, yeah, I really want to support caregivers and in a way that works for them. And then for people who are ready to do more and really have a change in their life, then I offer individualized coaching programs for them. And I have a website called sparkyourjourney.net. And there that has all my coaching programs on there. I offer 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, depending on where people are at. But I'm just so passionate about sharing that piece with people because I didn't know it was available. I didn't know that there was coaching was available, all sorts of coaching, but specifically for caregivers. And I would feel that my mind would race, my anxiety would take over my life. I just felt like my life was overwhelmed, and I didn't know what to do. And so really getting in touch with a coach and really just letting go and let myself be supported was the most life-changing experience. And so that's why I'm so passionate about supporting caregivers, because it can be different. It doesn't have to be that awful experience of anxiety or of overwhelming or of exhaustion. There is another way. And so I'm really passionate about that piece. When I was initially being coached, like I felt like it was as remarkable as a cure for cancer because it had changed my life so much. And I just wanted to know how to help other people to have the same experience that I was having. And so then that's when I went back to school and became a health and a life coach. And so that's kind of how that piece started.
I love that. And I want people to not get too hung up on the word caregiver. Because so many people don't identify as a caregiver. We are daughters or children, spouses, grandchildren. But really, we are in a role where we are caring and helping other people. So just want to make sure that if people are listening and they're like, well, I don't quite feel like a caregiver, I assure you that these programs are for you because you're diving into this, the act of caring for somebody and not wanting to lose yourself along the way.
And I feel like in our society, most women are caregivers in some way, shape, or form throughout their life, whether they're a mother, a spouse, responsible for fur babies, whatever it is. But throughout their life, they come into contact with having to care for somebody else. And how to balance that. We're not taught how to balance that. We're just taught how to give everything and be depleted. And that's what we should do, when actually it's the opposite. When we show up for ourselves, that's how we become the best version of ourselves.
That's perfect. Well, I'm so excited that we connected. That social media link, does do good.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I so appreciate you having me here today and just being able to connect with any of your community. I'm so honored and so appreciative.
Well, I think that with 66 million people in the US alone who are going through this, and you just never know what is going to set with somebody at what point. So I'm really excited that we're connected and have the opportunity to share your work with people.
Mhm.
And in the show notes, I will put links to your website and your Facebook group and all of that as well for people. Anything you feel like we didn't cover that we should be sharing with people?
I know we had talked about possibly maybe some of the biggest challenges caregivers face and some of the ways that just so people are listening and they're like, well, I'm not sure if my challenges are the same. So oftentimes challenges for caregivers there's a common thread. So just to share some of the biggest challenges that I see with the caregivers that I'm working with, just so people can relate. Sometimes when we hear, oh, that person's having the same experience, I don't feel so isolated because
Yes.
caregiving can be really isolating. So some of the biggest challenges I see are the loss of their identity, which we talked about, or even their own life. Like they say, I don't have a life anymore. The resentment, the guilt feelings that come up from that, totally normal. But so many caregivers beat themselves up because I shouldn't be resentful for caring for my mother or however it is, and really just learning how to digest and process the emotion piece. Is there no emotion is wrong? We're feeling the emotion, but how can we in a healthy way digest and process it? What if we ate a whole bunch of food and never digested it? It would just come out in awful ways. But our emotions are the same way when oftentimes we don't have a consistent way to process or digest our emotions, which is another just tool that we learn in our programs. And also exhaustion and overwhelm, burnout, getting sick themselves. Oftentimes caregivers, if you look at the statistics, they get sick at a much higher rate, which is scary because they put everything on the back burner for themselves. Having no time for themselves, not having any help at all. But there is help out there for everybody. We always find help some way, somehow, with the support of being able to brainstorm. Building healthy boundaries. Oftentimes caregivers have no boundaries at all, and that's really a challenge for them to build them. But once they do, then they can see that things really start to shift, and really the lack of self-care and being a priority in their own life, which makes them really end up feeling really unbalanced. So I just wanted to share some of the biggest challenges that I see in caregiver in case somebody's listening and they're like, well, I'm not sure if my challenge is the same as somebody else's, but we really do have a common thread often.
And I feel like so many caregivers, we start off as people pleasers.
Big time.
We just want to jump in and I can help and oh yeah, I can do that. But then occasionally mowing and picking up groceries evolves into more and more and more. And now you're not necessarily, you're using some of your sick time to take people to appointments, and it just starts to snowball.
Yes, and giving yourself permission to recognize that evolution of, I said, yes, I would definitely sign up for this, but now it's evolved into this and I can't do this. And that's okay. That's totally okay. And giving yourself that permission, because oftentimes people will just say, I have to, but we don't have to. We always do have a choice. And there is a way that can work for everybody.
Well, and I have a family that they really had to dig deep to be honest with what they were each willing to do and be accepting that other people just said that's beyond my scope, regardless of geography or any of that. So it's a lot of compassion and acceptance of yourself and each other, because when we come to the table with all kinds of expectations, it can get really tricky and personal and hurtful.
Absolutely. Especially
Yeah.
when you're dealing with the family dynamics, like you had said, you're already coming to the table with all of that, and then bringing the expectations, and everybody's looking through their own lens, and it can really unravel really quickly.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, I think your work is brilliant. And like I said, I'm so glad we got connected. And we will put in the show notes all the ways for people to check you out. And people are able to join your Facebook group,
Yep. It's the healthy caregiver.
The Healthy Caregiver. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, I see wonderful things for your future, and I can just see like this huge expansion.
That's great. And I'm so grateful to connect with you, because I love connecting with people supporting caregivers, because I feel like the network we can create will just be amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.